Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we will be discussing the greatest driver lineup of all time, in my opinion. The Mercedes dynasty has been the team to win the most championships in succession. And in my opinion, it's clear to see why. A big reason is not only the team's innovation and constant strive for greatness, but it's also their driver lineup. And I'm not talking about Nico and Lewis. I'm talking about Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas. Now, don't get me wrong, those are not the two greatest drivers of all time, but as a pairing, they are the greatest pairing of all time. Let me explain. In my opinion, a team works best with a number one and a number two driver. This is clearly evident with Ferrari's team right now, especially in 2019, where they didn't know who was the number one driver, and a lot of times when they actually made a decision on who was the number one driver, it was Vettel. And a lot of times that decision was incorrect. Think about China, when Vettel was told to go past Leclerc and he didn't really do anything. Anyway, moving on. The reason why they are the greatest driver lineup is also because they have Lewis. Lewis is an astonishing driver. We all know that. He's breaking many records, and he has to be in the talk for the greatest driver of all time. I believe he still has so many years ahead of him, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets 100 wins in his career. To be fair, he has had amazing machinery his whole life, from his first season with McLaren. Hardly any rookies get their first drive to be in such a good car. But people need to be reminded that he tied Fernando Alonso in his first ever season in F1. He was good out the box, and he's been in the title fight since. Martin Brundle put that said that many years ago, and that he's always in the title fight. He's always in the discussion. So we all know that Hamilton's a great driver, but why is Valtteri Bottas also considered to be in this greatest driver pairing of all time? If you haven't watched the race in Italy this year, I would highly recommend watching it. It is an astounding race, and the winner will surprise you. However, if you have watched it, you've seen Bottas's performance. We all know that the Mercedes was bad at overtaking. However, Bottas should have overtaken Norris. He only overtook Raikkonen since the red flag, and after that, he didn't overtake anybody. Before that, he didn't really overtake anybody. He was just there, and he went from sixth to fifth in the Mercedes, and the Mercedes was lapping seconds ahead than Albon, who was at the back. So he should have really been up there, but he wasn't. Um, and this is partially due to Bottas, partially due to Mercedes in Italy, but we've seen this before. And Bottas really doesn't put up too much of a fight against Lewis. This past race was a good chance to do so. Lewis was down the order, but he only finished 2 points, two places ahead of him. Now, another reason why I would say that Bottas is a good driver is because that he is that little farther back from Hamilton. Sorry, not a good driver in this pairing. It is because he's a little bit farther back. When a team has two number one drivers, like I said before with Ferrari, but they also just implode. If you look at Mercedes with Nico and Lewis, they they struggled in some races because they didn't know who was to go in front. They battled. In Austria, they collided with each other and threw away a 1-2 finish. So a lot of times it backfired. And I don't know how many times Bottas and Hamilton have collided together, but I don't think it's as many as Nico and Lewis. Also think about 2014, the Belgian Grand Prix. Stuff like that doesn't happen with a number one and a number two driver. And I believe that the greatest dynasties and the greatest runs with championships come from a number one and a number two driver. If you look at Renault, their 2 year stint. If you look at Ferrari, their 5 year stint. Sorry, their 5 year stint. That's mainly down to the fact that they had a number one and a number two driver. If Mika Hakkinen and Schumacher were on the same team, yeah, it would be extremely exciting to watch, and maybe they would win by 30 seconds each. But you could still get a 1-2 finish with a driver that's a little bit slower than the one in front, especially with how fast the Ferrari car was. And I would bet against Hakkinen and Schumacher to finish every race. Not only would they be colliding, but their friendship would deteriorate, and within the team they would deteriorate because they know that they have two good drivers. They know they have a good car, but when they don't finish one and two, they feel down on themselves. But also with a driver like Bottas, he's not going to go anywhere, and he's still going to be content finishing second to Hamilton, as he knows if he goes to a different team, it's not going to be the same because Mercedes is still going to be at the top without him. Now, also having a number one and a number two driver means that you have a number one driver. Means that you still have a driver like Hamilton that is so consistent, and Hamilton is so good at team building. Granted, he also talks highly of his team because his team is doing extremely well. But he points out the team a lot of times, and he's good about team building, and he's really built up this Mercedes team. He was the final piece in the puzzle, but he really completed it. Now, I'm not saying Hamilton is the greatest of all time, and some can argue that the Senna and Prost teammate driver pairing was the greatest driver pairing of all time. I can understand why, but they were only there for a short number of years because of the fact that their friendship just deteriorated and they hated driving with each other. No team likes that. No team wants to see what happened in the 2007 Hungarian qualifying when Alonso was blocking Hamilton. When that happens within the team becomes divided. But when a team is working together and team orders are respected, that's when you know that a team has two functioning drivers and two drivers that are cohesive as a unit. One respects the other and one knows their place. So, I would like to hear your opinion on what the greatest driver lineup of all time is, and I don't see this driver pairing going anywhere. Mercedes keep signing Bottas to short-term contracts, but I don't see them signing another driver. People who around me have said that Vettel should be a great move for Mercedes, but it just wouldn't work out. You'd have two guys hungry for more championships, and they would just keep battling each other. Regardless, if one doesn't perform, their whole reputation is gonna go downhill. So I don't think that Vettel's gonna go to Mercedes anytime soon, and we don't know where he's gonna go, but that's besides the point. Bottas is gonna be there to stay, and Hamilton is for sure gonna be there to stay. Thank you for listening to my opinion on who the best driver lineup is, and I'll see you next time.